Yeah, hi everybody. Today I'm going to show what's new for Simcenter Testlab 2606. I'm going to go into the 2606 release, and we've changed the look and feel. So the software package is called Simcenter Testlab. That's the overall package. And within it, we have both Simcenter Testlab Classic applications and Simcenter Testlab Neo applications. We've modified the icons. So you can see here that the icons are going to have this different color, look, and feel. We're going to add 2606 to the release now. So a lot of the Siemens employees have a script. So when we install Testlab, we run a script and we add 2406, 2506, 2606 after the release. That way, when I go to start desktop, I don't see 5 desktops that just say Testlab desktop. I actually see the release at the end of that. And now we've added that to the standard install. So after every icon you start for Testlab 2606, you're going to see 2606 at the end of it. So if I search under the Start menu for Desktop Neo, I'll see Desktop Neo 2606. If I start it, the icon is going to have TLN for Testlab Neo. And I'll see that in the Start menu. I'll see that on your Windows shortcut, and you'll see it in the taskbar. You'll either see it running as TLN for the Neo applications, or you'll see it running as TLC for the classic applications. We've introduced that TLN and TLC nomenclature for the Testlab Neo and the Testlab Classic applications. So this is what the folders look like now. So if I go to the shortcut on my desktop, I'm going to open it up for 2606. I'm going to see all the Testlab Classic applications. So I'll see Testlab Classic for acoustic, environmental, signature structures, etc. Then after that, I'll see all of the Testlab Neo applications: acoustic, durability, environmental, signature structures, blah, blah, blah. Below that, we're going to see Desktop Standard and Advanced 2606, Desktop Neo 2606, the link to the documentation, Go Acquisition, that's brand new, tools, as well as your user configuration folder. This is the new look and feel. So if I start Testlab Classic, you're going to see that the application basically looks the same, but we have changed the colors to represent this Simcenter look and feel. And they have a couple different look and feels, and this is one of their dark views. So we can see here that we've got dark backgrounds on the navigator bar and things like that. If I start Neo, I'm going to see the taskbar that starts up like this. So I see all the tiles, and I can see that the tiles have changed color a little bit. So the green one here for view data is a start point, and it's a different color because it's actually active. I can see the other tasks I can jump to, and the help is in this yellow color over here. And then inside the Neo application, you can see we also change the colors, very similar like we did inside the Classic application. Are there any changes to the documentation? For several releases now, when we install Testlab, the help files, basically there's 2 parts to the help file. One is we install the Siemens documentation server. Then after that, we install the Testlab documentation. So I think since 2206, this has been a prerequisite. So when we install Testlab, we first installed the documentation server, and after that, we installed the Testlab documents. And unfortunately, there were some issues with that. So sometimes people had trouble installing this Elasticsearch Windows service. And what happened is you would install the prerequisites for Testlab, that would fail, and sometimes the Testlab installation would fail because the prereq wasn't done. You'd have to start it up again. We did see at some customers, 75% of their colleagues would be fine, but then some of them, it would not install the help files properly and they couldn't be used. So for 2606, what we're doing is we're going to point you by default to the help files on Support Center. So rather than installing several gigabytes for the documentation server from Siemens, and then several gigabytes for our Testlab documents, we're going to skip those steps altogether and remove it as a prerequisite when installing Testlab. So what we're going to do is we're going to point to the Support Center. So it's removed as a prerequisite. It's a much smaller installation, so these are positives. No issue starting the Windows service. We're going to point directly to Support Center. And these documents, they don't need a login. So basically, even if you don't have a valid sold to, Even if your sold to becomes inactive because you're off support, even if you don't have a valid web key or support center login, these links will still all work. So it's not behind the logged in version part of support center. But the negative is it requires internet access. So you need to be able to either at the office or on the road or at home be able to access the internet. And if you can go to Google or if you can go to a web browser and go to a website, you can use these documents. If you don't want that and you want the help files locally, you could still install the manuals from the splash screen. And there's two steps: install the documentation server, and after that, install the Simcenter Testlab manuals. And you could install that on all of your machines, or you could install it at one machine at your company, then every other person could point to it via your intranet. So that would be a local resource rather than needing to go to the web to find the intranet. And those are the three choices now. So when you go to the manual for configuration tool in 2606, rather than just a documentation server like we see in 2506 and earlier, we're going to see the default option is Support Center. And then you'll be able to access Support Center for all of your help. Or you could tell it to use a documentation server. For my local machine, this would be localhost and then the port you're using. If you decide at your company to have one person's computer act as a documentation server, or maybe it's a server somewhere on your network, this would be the name of that server rather than localhost, and everybody at your company could point to one server for the installation. So those are the three choices for the documentation. So hopefully that works better for you. By default, everything should work provided you have internet access. And now, are there new applications? So one thing I mentioned right away is this Go acquisition. So we can start desktop, standard and advanced, desktop Neo, and we can also start Go acquisition. And I don't have a slide on this, but this Go acquisition is going to replace the recording workbook. And in 2506 and earlier, the recording workbook allows you to start an application without a license, talk to a SCADA Access, Mobile, Lab, or RS, go to channel setup, set up your channels, check your instrumentation, do scopes, make everything works properly, and then you could write a recording workbook or save a project template and give it to somebody else. And then you could open that in the scope app or the recorder app and take data, or you could email that project template to somebody else and they could take data. What we've done with 2606 is this Go acquisition allows you to record throughput data. So now it's a free data acquisition package, and it works with any of the SCADA hardware. There's no license. It allows you to save a run with an LDSF time history. It allows you to preview the data after the run to make sure the time history looks okay. It doesn't have all the capabilities of the desktop to create custom reports and pictures and things like that, but you can browse to the LDSF, you can view it, make sure it looks okay, and then you can export it to another format like MATLAB, a universal file, or encode, whatever you want. And that's not going to be licensed. So that's going to be brand new for 2606. Under Testlab, there's two new applications under acoustics. For sound transmission loss with impedance tube, we've added a 3-mic method in addition to the 4-mic method. So it used to be you started sound transmission loss using impedance tube, and it only used the 4-mic method. And now there's two options available to you, different methods, one using the 3-mic method and one using the 4-mic method. We've also combined the Testlab Classic folders for signature and Testlab General Processing into one brand new one called Testlab Classic Signature. So under Testlab Classic Signature, you're going to see Signature Acquisition, Signature Acquisition Standard, Signature Acquisition Advanced, Signature Throughput Processing, Time Signal Calculator, etc. We've combined Testlab Structures Acquisition and Analysis to Testlab Classic Structures. So here you'll see impact testing, spectral testing, MEMA-RF testing, swept and step sign, normal modes, as well as geometry and modal analysis and operating deflection shapes. Those classic applications have all been combined into one Testlab Classic Structures folder. We've also added some new folders for Neo. There's going to be a acoustic folder that's got sound quality. Under Testlab Neo Signature, you're going to see Process Designer, Schedule Acquisition, I'll talk about in a slide or two, Signature Analysis, which is signature data acquisition, as well as time data acquisition, which has no add-ins. Under Simcenter Testlab Neo Structures, there's geometry creation, impact acquisition, modal analysis, modal correlation, operational data animation, and what's new is shaker acquisition. So shaker acquisition basically starts up time data acquisition with a source control task that allows you to set up a shaker, to use random, burst random, periodic chirp, pseudo-random. So that's the first shaker acquisition package we have inside Neo. And then under Simcenter Neo System NVH Prediction, we have the NVH Simulator, Process Designer, Transfer Path Analysis, Virtual Point Transformation, and Virtual Prototype Assembly. Are there new applications? Yes, Schedule Acquisition. So this is what we're excited about. So this first came out in 2506, and it only worked with the SCADAS RS in the Recorder app. It allows you to set up a test schedule ahead of time where you want someone to maybe go to a certain spot, maybe wait for 30 seconds, maybe do 3 run-ups real quick, maybe wait for 60 seconds, maybe drive somewhere else, maybe do 3 run-ups real slow, maybe wait some time, then maybe do some averaged acquisitions, and then go to the next step. So we've got this schedule acquisition that's been expanded in 2606. It works with Simcenter Testlab time data acquisition. So it's going to work with any SCADAS front end that can work with time data acquisition. So the XS, the mobile, the recorder, or the RS. And I have a couple examples here where here I'm going to set up a test schedule that's going to do 3 slow run-ups, 3 fast run-ups, 10 seconds of stationary measurements, and then 10 seconds of stationary measurements at a different speed. And then we can expand these schedule tasks and see additional information on it. And then when I start this up, it's basically going to run time data acquisition. I'll be able to see all these tasks I'm going to step through, as well as the bottom, see how I'm finishing, how I'm working on each of these tasks, and where I'm at in the status, and if it's going to pass or not pass, basically, if it's finished successfully or not. Block editor is something else we've added. So this was available in Classic, but it was never available in Neo. It's not an add-in. It's always available to you on the desktop task. So you're going to see under desktop, you're going to see view data. And besides that, you can see the block editor. If you want to hide it, you can always go to the tile here on your tasks and hide it if you don't want to see it. But by default, it's always going to show up in the desktop task underneath the block editor subtask. And this allows you to basically create a curve. So I can tell that I want an overall level or an FRF or an order. Then I can start typing values to build this curve up and then save it in my project. So it's going to be very useful for a target curve or a benchmark. Or I could also tell it to import a block and then remove bad samples. So maybe I've got an FRF that's got some spikes in it or some drop-offs. I could import that FRF and then basically smooth it here inside the data block editor and then save it and use it somewhere else in the application. So you can start from scratch or you can import a block. We've also made changes to the RPM extraction add-in. For the last couple of releases, it's been available to you in the Process Designer, and you needed to know a starting point. So basically, at a certain point in time, or a certain point in RPM, you had to have a dominant order. You had to know what that order was, and you had to know about when it started. So if you looked at a color map, you had to have a dominant order here. And then you could use it in Process Designer and feed it a lot of runs and do all that processing all at once. But if your data wasn't very clear, there wasn't a good tool to graphically draw that order on a color map. And now that's available to you in 2606. So when you add this offline RPM extraction add-in, you're going to get a new task called Extract RPM. I put some data in the input basket. Up at the top here, under my preview channel, I pick one of my channels. Up in the taskbar, in the ribbon, I can pick my frequency resolution. Based on that, when I pick my channel, it's going to draw this color map. And then I can put a cross cursor on this color map and tell it to accept a point. And if I use one point, it's going to use the single point method and extrapolate to the beginning of the time trace and the end of the time trace to draw this complete order. And then based on the order, it's going to create the RPM time curve. If I give it 2 points or more, it's going to use either the 2-point method or the multi-point method. And then it just draws the curve between the first point and the last point. And if you're happy, you hit accept, and it saves a brand new run, annotated with the original run name as well as the segment that's being used, and then you can use that in further processing. On the right side, you can see all of the tools that are being used to estimate the RPM time curve and the order. These are exactly the same that we have available to you in Classic. Another change to an existing application is Simcenter Testlab Neo transfer path analysis. In 2506, we included direct forces and matrix inversion. And for matrix inversion, we supported frequency spectrums, autopowers, and waterfalls and orders. And in a service pack, we started supporting time histories. So if we give it a time history, our force is a time history. And then we can use that in basically a time domain TPA study. And it also supported block forces. In 2606, we've expanded it to include the mount stiffness method as well. Any other changes? Yes, we've added save to original run, which I know a lot of customers have been asking for. So now in Process Designer, I can tell it to save the runs to a new run, to an input run, or to a new run in the original section. There I can go back to the original section, which we couldn't do before. If I add it to a new run in the original section, it goes to the original section that was added to the input basket and not the active section that's in your pull down. And it works for everything except if you're creating a new run as part of the process. So that's kind of the caveat. So it saves to the original section is not supported if you're creating a new run as part of your process. For example, if I have a run average. So if I add 3 runs to my input basket, all my process results could go back to the original section, except the run average will go to the current active section rather than the original section. If I'm renaming a run as same as a process, same thing, it's going to go to the active section rather than the original run. And then if you're editing the descriptive annotation as part of a method, that always creates a new run as well. So if the process is creating a new run, it's going to go to the active section. If it's not creating a new run, it could go to the original section if you set it that way. Are there improvements to the calculators? Yes, we've made some improvements to virtual channels, the calculator, which is for time histories, the block calculator, which is for block data, and the map calculator, which is for waterfalls. So they all have different commands or methods available within them. Some things I'm highlighting, there are block methods for changing the x-axis. So if I have an order that's versus RPM, and I want to save it versus frequency, I can do that. Or vice versa. If I have an order that's versus frequency, and I want to save it to versus RPM, I can do that. I can also smooth my block data. I can integrate, double integrate, differentiate, double differentiate. Those are available to you now. I can change the direction if I want all my data to be positive or negative, Z, for example. So that changes the polarity as well as the point ID direction. And then I can also add or subtract dB, or I add offsets in dB in the block calculator. So if I wanted to have a F or F or an order, if I wanted to add 3 dB or subtract 3 dB, I could do that now. In virtual channels and channel setup, we've extended it to include the TACO functions. So if you've got the TACO processing add-in, you can go TACO moments to RPM, TACO moments to angle, etc. as part of the virtual channel. Map calculator includes maps for orders, tonality, roughness, modulation. So that's this lower picture I have here where my input is going to all these different maps, and all of these maps go into the map calculator. So for example, if you wanted to get the vector sum, or if I wanted to do some math on that map, you can do that. It also supports now a block being added to the map calculator. So maybe I wanted to divide all of my waterfalls by a block to normalize them. That's available to me as well. Here I can import one block or several blocks, bring that into my map calculator, and do map on my maps divided or multiplied by that block if you want to. We've also added dedicated multiplex and demultiplex methods. So if you have two microphones and if you want to combine them into a single channel with a left and right ear, we can multiplex it. If you've got a channel that has a left and right ear, we can demultiplex it if you want two separate channels. We've also added some changes to the displays. So on the color map and the function map displays, there was always a single x-axis and a single z-axis. So normally your x-axis could be frequency, and your z-axis would be time or throughput time or RPM or any of your static channels. Now in the color map and the function map displays, I can right-click on the axes and I can add a secondary x-axis or I can add a secondary z-axis. So here we're showing the z-axis, and maybe I want the left one to be RPM or time, and then I could have the right one be another static channel, another time mode, or RPM if you want. Because the z-axis shows on the left side and shows the second one on the right side. The other thing we've done for preview is we've added multi-page preview. So here I'm in the desktop and I've highlighted a run and it's going to populate and show these color maps. So here it looks like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that works fine if I have one run, but if I have to highlight the section and maybe I have 4 runs, it's going to try to show 20 color maps on this single page. They're all going to be really tiny. It's probably going to have to hide the legend and a bunch of stuff. So now what we can do is when we switch from standard view to row versus column view, we can add a mode that will show multiple pages. And we can have the multiple pages via different items, such as run name or DOF ID. So if I did it versus run name, I would have one page for all 5 of these color maps on different pages for each of the runs. If I separated by DOF ID, I would have one page for my first DOF ID and all of the runs, and then another page for the second DOF ID for all of the runs. And there's different ways you can sort that. Here I'm showing run name and DOF ID, but it can be any attribute you have available to you. It also works with print with preview. So here I hit with print with preview. I'm going to get one slide for each one of these preview pages. Split by run or split by DOF ID, I'd have one page in my Word or PowerPoint file for each one of these previews. So we think this makes it a lot easier for looking at a large pivot table across multiple DOF IDs or multiple runs. It really helps you organize it and send it to a print. We've also added an option to recognize classic pictures and import them. We had complaints for people that I've been using this classic project for a year or two. I have all of these pictures in all of my sections. When I go to Neo, I've lost them. And now when you open that project in Neo, you're going to see here, item up here at the top of the report area that says classic pictures found. And it says there are 5 pictures from Classic Navigator available. Click to import these pictures. Then when you hit click, it's going to create a report and copy the 5 pictures from Classic Testlab into Neo. Or if you use the pull down to create a new picture at the very bottom of it, there's the same option here to import from Classic. We don't go the other way. So the Neo displays or the Neo pictures have a lot more functionality, such as queries and stuff like that, that Classic doesn't support. So we can't take the Neo pictures back to Classic, but we can only take the Classic pictures to Neo. But if you go back and forth between the two, if you create new pictures in Classic, you'll be able to come back to Neo and import those new pictures you created. We've added a new query mode. When you go to data as queries in 2506, we had regular data and data as queries. And then if you drag data in when you were using data as queries, if it could find any data, it would kind of leave the display blank and basically told you it couldn't find any appropriate data. In 2606, the new mode called automatic queries. And then if we drag data in, if it can make a query, it will make a query. And then the legend will show you a queue indicating that a query was made. If we can't make a query, then it's going to not show you the queue. So for example, we can only make queries from the active project or existing projects. So if I browse to something under my computer or this PC and it's not supported by the queries, I can still drag and drop it into a picture and I'll see that data and it will be annotated as regular data without having the queue next to it where a query was made. The other thing we did is we added a preview mode to the process designer. So basically, I can create a preview method in the process designer, and I can connect my spectrum averages to it. And then when I run the process, it's going to automatically create a preview for all of the spectrum averages passed to it into the preview method. Here I can also calculate spectrum maps and send the spectrum maps to the preview and the spectrum average to the preview. So then I would see both as well. So it's a way for novice users to quickly get a view on the results. Expert users can have an overview of what comes out of the processing. If you give it multiple items, I can also use this mode where I want to split into multiple pictures for my preview. So if it gets too busy with data, maybe I have 20 color maps it's trying to draw here, I can tell it to split by run, or I can split it by DOF ID, or split by any attribute I have available to me. And then you might have multiple pages with multiple preview pictures. That's supported as well. What's not supported is multiple preview methods per process. So we're only going to have one preview method, and then you pick and choose what items you want to connect to that preview method. Automatic report printing. So this was added to the process designer, as well as time data acquisition and signature acquisition in Neo, such that you can print a report immediately after the run. So in addition to automatically processing it, we could also automatically send it to your report and send that to the printer if you want. And it could be a physical printer, or it could be opening up a Word or PowerPoint file. That is all my slides. So here I opened up my Testlab 2606 shortcut. So you can see that it's got the TL icon, it's a different color. I can see that's added a 2606 to the end of it automatically. I see all of these classic folders followed by the Neo folders. I see desktop standard and advanced. I see desktop Neo, and I see this Go acquisition. If I go to Testlab Neo, this is what it looks like with the new colors. I can always say I don't want to see the tiles at startup, but by default, you're showing the tiles at startup. If I go to view data here we've got the data block editor. So this is not something I can turn off. I can tell it here I want to create maybe an overall level, pick some different things, pick the number of lines, pick the start, pick the end. And I can just start typing. And then I could copy and paste this from Excel if I want. Okay. And then I can save this, and then this saves it inside my current project in my current section. Here I can see the formats. I can give it a point name if I want. So all the same things we can do in Classic. If I wanted to import a block, and let's see if I have any data here. I can import a block. So there's my FRF. I can see here that it brought in the value, it picked the function class and everything. And then if I had an issue, I could start overwriting these values to smooth it out if I want, and then save that FRF. Here I can copy and paste from Excel, very similar to Classic Testlab. If I have a fixed x-axis, I might not be able to copy to the x-axis here. If I tell it a variable x-axis, then I can copy the x values as well as the y values. We've been getting a lot of questions on modal analysis. So this was new, I think the last release inside Testlab Neo. And we can add the FRFs to the input basket, go to the modal dashboard, basically run here. And we made a couple of improvements inside modal analysis in 2606. This is an old convertible database we've had for a while. One of the things we did improvements on is that now I can select an off-diagonal mode, and now we see those two modes on top of each other in a main and overlaid. And if I click on the diagonal, I see a single mode on top of it. But anytime I click in the off-diagonal mode, you should see two modes on top of each other in this main and overlaid area. So there I had two modes on top of each other. So that was one minor improvements. One of the other things we added was we added the MLMM, so the maximum likelihood modal model. So if you turn that add-in on, so the technology behind it is very similar to what we have in Classic. But by default, it brings in the last modes I calculated. So these were from Polymax. And then I can pick down at the bottom, I can pick my number of iterations and my cost function variation. And then I can hit run. And then it's going to calculate these results using MLMM, which is useful in a couple of cases. One is Polymax has some issues if you have a lot of references. And sometimes we get customers with 10 or 20 references. And then the stabilization diagram kind of falls apart. MLMM is a way to give it an initial set of modes, and it helps when you have multiple references. It also is an iterative way to get a cleaner mode shape, and for sure, an iterative way to get better FRF synthesis, in case you want to use those perhaps with simulation, for example. Then what we did here by default is if I pick a map between the MLMM and the original ones, I can click this off-diagonal mode, and I'm hiding my geometry. But if I had the geometry, I'd see it animate the original Polymax modes versus my MLMM modes. And then you can see the improvements to the FRF synthesis. You can see the cost function, how it flattens out above 6 iteration. The other thing we did is we added a dedicated modal synthesis worksheet. It's a modal synthesis task. In 2506, we could do a modal dashboard. We could look at the FRF synthesis for a couple FRFs and then still save all of them to the run if you wanted. Here we can go to modal synthesis, and then I can synthesize the modes at any processing set and then pick and choose which FRFs I want to save into the project. Then we could also pick and choose which FRFs we'd like to save. For example, if we wanted a subset of the FRF saved, and that wasn't available inside 2506. Maybe I'll show, can find some data. Maybe I'll show offline RPM extraction real quick. So here I have an LDSF. I'm going to add it to my input basket. I moved it over here under extract RPM. And then you basically enter the worksheet here. Syncing, it's running. So basically what it's doing now is at a predefined frequency resolution 0.5 hertz in a time increment of 0.1, it's calculating my color map. I think I must have a pretty high sample rate. So that it created this color map here. If I want up here at the top under my quick spectral map in my ribbon, I can change my time increment or my resolution. If I do that, it's going to recalculate the color map on the fly. Or if I use the preview channel here and pick a different channel, then it would recalculate this color map on the fly. And then basically I can put a point over here. And then I can tell it to add a point. It shows up on my table on my right side. And then I can tell it to predict. And I have to tell it what order I want. I'm going to pick second order and then hit predict. And now it's going to try to draw a line around that red curve. And then if I don't like those settings, on the right side, I can tweak the frame size, the overlap, the spectral lines, all the same settings you have in Classic in order to tweak that RPM time. Then it's going to show you the predicted RPM. I guess it's two steps. One is it's trying to draw an order there. Then I told it second order, and based on that second order value, it's going to try to predict this RPM time curve. And it did that from 900 to 4800 RPM. If I like that, I can hit accept, and it would save that inside my run. here inside this project in section 1, it saved a run called turbo data RPM extract from 0 to 21.07 seconds was my segment. If I wanted to use a different method, I can pick basically a point here and a point. Now I've got 2. That's going to use the 2-point method. And if I pick another point up here, it's going to use a multi-point method. And there's different options depending on what method you're using. Now I have 3 points that I can hit predict. And now it's just going to extrapolate the RPM between the first and the last point. So usually if you're using the 2-point method or the multi-point method, you want to bound your points you're picking to the beginning and the end of the data. Otherwise, you're going to lose some of the time history. Okay, so it's created the RPM time curve. So now you can see that drew the line here. If I didn't like one of those points, I could reject. I can remove one of these points and then try again. Okay. That's offline RPM extraction. I think at the end here, but thanks everyone. Have a good day.